join us on a Tuesday. Glad to be with you here, as we always are, every morning, Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to noon. So we got a lot to get to, a lot to go over. As I mentioned in hour number 3, the West Coast Conference Commissioner Gloria Nevarez will be joining us, and the first ever deaf NBA basketball player, Lance Allred, will be joining us in hour number 3. But the woman we have on the line right now, her name is Juanita Broaddrick. Back in 1978, she accused Bill Clinton of rape, and she has a book out, and that book is called You'd Better Put Some Ice on That, How I Survived Being Raped by Bill Clinton. Very serious matter, very serious subject, and I will also say, back when she told her story, there were a lot of people that didn't believe her. Guess what? Times have changed, and now many people believe her. I certainly am one of them, and Juanita Broaddrick right now on the line. Juanita, thank you so much for joining us. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing fine. Thank you for having me on this morning. It's morning out there.
That's right. It is.
Yeah.
That's true. It is.
Yeah.
It is morning here. Well, first of all, let me tell you, I appreciate you taking some time to join us. I think you're a very brave woman to share your story publicly, number one, and to have to tell it in vivid detail. I'm sure that's very difficult for you. But if I may ask you this, when was the first time you met Bill Clinton? How did you develop some sort of friendship relationship with him to begin with? Can we go back to those days? I would imagine that was in the late 70s.
Oh, yeah. Yes, it was. In fact, it was about a month before the rape occurred. I owned a nursing home. I'm a registered nurse. And some of my friends had volunteered to do campaigning for Bill Clinton and asked me to do that too. And so, yes, I thought that was real exciting. I'd never done anything like that. And so for about a month, I would go around, put up yard signs with my little 8-year-old son, and just sort of got involved in the campaign itself in a local level. Mm-hmm. Then after I had been doing that for about 2 or 3 weeks, the state office called me and said, Mr. Clinton's going to be in your area, and we'd like for him to tour your nursing home. God, I was excited.
Right.
And so was all of my staff and my residents. So that day came. He came to the nursing home with all of his entourage, and the local newspaper, took a photo of Bill Clinton and myself and 2 of my residents.
Right.
And that's what's on the front of my book. And then after the photo op, he comes over, starts talking to me. He was so charismatic. And, you know, when he talks to you, it's as though you're the only person in the room.
Right.
You know, he just has he had that ability.
Sure.
I have no idea if he still did, still does. But I took the opportunity to tell him about how Arkansas nursing homes were struggling and that we couldn't give satisfactory care. And he just sort of stopped me in the middle of my telling him about our problems. And he said, are you ever in Little Rock? We really need to talk about this. And I told him, yes. In fact, I'd be there in about 3 weeks, bringing my director of nursing down to a seminar. Mm-hmm. And he said, well, call me, give me a call and bring me some information about this, and let's talk about it. So I was excited. You know, I thought, my God, I'm going to be able to get help from the governor himself, because we all knew he would win. So it was sort of a sure thing.
So 3 weeks later, I would imagine you call him. How do you guys end up in a room alone together?
Okay. When my nurse and I, Norma Rogers, we drove down the night before on the 24th of April, 1978. When we get up the next morning about 8 o'clock, we call his office. And this is the strange part. I told her, I said, this is Mrs. Hickey. And I couldn't even ask her if Mr. Clinton was there or anything. She said, oh, Mrs. Hickey, Mr. Clinton said if you ever called, to call his apartment.
Right.
And so that's what I did. Told him we were there and had an hour off for our lunch and would like to meet him at his campaign office. And he said, you know, I'm not going to be there today. Why don't I just come to your hotel and we'll meet down in the coffee shop?
Right.
And I thought, oh, God, that's great. I don't have to drive clear across town. So I turned to Norma and I said, you go on to the meeting and sign us in. When I get through in the coffee shop, I'll be right there. So she leaves, and I'm waiting for him to call. He does call within a little while. And he said, you know, Juanita, he said, this is Bill. And he said, it's so crowded down here, and there's even reporters running around. He said, can we have coffee and talk about this in your room? And listen, I don't care if it's been 40 years. I still remember thinking, oh, my gosh, in my room. But he was Attorney General,
right?
And I believed what
I don't
he was
blame you for.
telling me.
I don't blame you for saying yes, because you trusted him at that time. So he comes. You guys meet in your room. What happens next?
Okay, I usher him in. Of course, what was shocking is when I go to the door and I open the door, and he's standing out in the hallway in dark sunglasses. I thought, that's so strange, but I just forgot about it. Ushered him on in, and we began to talk. And I had this large table in my room that looked out a window. And just as I start to pour the coffee, he says, come around, I want to show you something. And he was pointing down below at a little building that was an 1800 jailhouse that he wanted to restore when he became governor. And so I just looked at it. I have no idea if I said anything to him, and started back around the table. And that's when he grabbed me, started trying to kiss me, and that was a shock. And I just push him away and say, no, that's no, that's not going to happen. And I start to go back around again, and that's when he gets very rough with me and grabs me and forces me back on the bed. And I'm screaming to high heaven. I'm shocked. I mean, I had no idea what in the hell was going on.
Right.
And every time I would scream, he would bite on my upper lip. It was so painful. I couldn't believe it. He would just get around to my face and get my lip in his mouth and bite on it.
Let me just say that there's no woman, man, anybody that should ever have to go through what you had to endure, and like you said, the hell you went through. I don't want you to have to go into further detail. I think we know what happens there next. But after that horrific situation, when the sex is over with, after he allegedly rapes you, didn't you say in your book that he, because the name of your book is, you'd better put some ice on it? That's what he told you after this?
Yeah, but there I am sitting up on the side of the bed, just gutturally crying and not believing. I'd never known anybody that had been raped. And I'm sitting up, but the first thing that he says to me, he just looks at me sort of bewildered, like, why are you crying? And says, don't worry, I'm sterile. I had mumps when I was a boy.
Oh, my
and I
God.
thought, Jesus Christ, why are you telling me that?
That's awful.
And then that just made it worse. And then he puts on his suit coat, gathers himself, puts on his sunglasses, and as he walks to the door, he motions to my mouth. I mean, my mouth was bleeding. My mouth was swelling. I looked horrible.
Yeah.
And he said, you'd better put some ice on that, and walks out the door.
That is just awful. Did you contact the authorities? Who's the first person you told, and how long did it take you to tell somebody?
About 30 minutes, because
really?
I never showed up.
Okay.
Yeah, I never showed up for the meeting downstairs, so my nurse came looking for me at the morning break.
Right.
And she comes to the door, and, of course, when he left, I got up and locked it as quick as I could, because my thought was, my God, somebody's going to come in and murder
So you
me.
tell your, if you're just joining us, we're speaking with Juanita Broaddrick. She accused Bill Clinton of rape, and she's describing it now. It happened allegedly back in 1978, and she has a book out called You Better Put Some Ice on That. Okay, so you tell somebody 30 minutes later. Were the police ever involved?
Oh, no. In fact, when she saw me, when I opened the door, I just started crying all over again, and we went and sat on the end of the bed, and she ran and got ice for my mouth.
Why didn't you or her or one of your friends decide to contact the authorities?
Oh, there was no way in hell I could do that.
Mm-hmm.
Bill Clinton, as Attorney General, regulated my businesses. And you say call the police.
Right.
He was the police.
That's true.
He was the Attorney General.
I understand. I just want to give people a little bit of background, because some people might question, well, how come you didn't contact the authorities? That's a very valid point. So, Juanita, one of the reasons why we wanted to have you on, I'm sure you've heard about this new Hulu documentary called Hillary. So this is Bill Clinton himself. This is Bill Clinton, who is talking about the affairs that he had in this new Hulu film that I just said that is called Hillary. Have a listen to this, and then I want you to comment on it.
Everybody's life has pressures and disappointments and terrors, fears of whatever. Things I did to manage my anxieties for years. I'm a totally different person than I was.
All right, so what is your comment now? He says he's a different person now than he was, and he said he needed to manage his anxieties. What would you say to him now after that?
Oh, I could care less about a consensual sexual affair with Monica Lewinsky. I feel sorry for her, but I want him to answer to all the women that he sexually assaulted and raped. That's what I'm concerned about. And for him to be groveling like he did on television, wanting sympathy, made me, like I tweeted, want to take a baseball bat to him.
Well, listen, if anybody raped me, I would certainly feel the same way. So I don't blame you for feeling that way. But you did mention Juanita. You did mention Monica Lewinsky. So he talks about Monica Lewinsky in this Hulu documentary. Here's what Bill Clinton had to say about Monica.
I feel terrible about the fact that Monica Lewinsky's life was defined by it, unfairly, I think. You know, over the years, I've watched her trying to get a normal life back again. But you got to decide how to define normal.
Do you think, Juanita, that he is being genuine there when talking about Monica?
Oh, no. Back in 1991, I was down in Little Rock again at a seminar. Someone pulls me out and says that somebody needs to speak to me out in the hallway. And I go down around the hallway, and there stands Bill Clinton. And he said the very same crap to me. And it was absolutely unbelievable. It frightened me. And I just turned to him and I said, "You go to hell." And I walked off.
I don't blame you. So did you ever speak to Bill Clinton after this alleged rape occurred back in 1978? Did he ever reach out to you and try to meet with you again?
Yes, in 1991.
Really? So
Yes,
how does this happen? 13 years after you claim that you were raped by Bill Clinton, and I have no reason to doubt you, 13 years later he contacts you again. How does this happen?
Oh, listen, I was shocked that he knew where I was and could reach out and touch me at that moment in time. I just absolutely couldn't believe it. And then 2 weeks later, he announced he was running for president, and he was just trying to quiet me, I guess.
See, I can't even imagine what you went through during that time, because here you are, a woman who no one should ever have to go through what you went through. And now you see him become the leader of the free world, the president of the United States. You see him on television. He's everywhere every single day. It's one thing to have to go through this type of sexual assault and rape. It's another thing to have to see the person who did this to you all over the television. What were you going through in your mind when you see him running for office and then eventually winning?
Oh, it was devastating to my life. You know, it was just like I was experiencing the rape all over again. Every time I saw him on television, I had to switch it. The minute he would come on, I would try to switch it to anything or turn it off because I couldn't stand to see his face or hear his voice.
You mentioned other sexual assault victims by Bill Clinton. Did you come into contact with anyone who also basically had a similar story to you in regards to Bill Clinton sexually assaulting them in the greater Arkansas area or in the United States?
Yes, I've had a 75-year-old woman contacted me and drove 500 miles to talk to me about it. And her rape occurred in 1979. And I'm always leery when somebody contacts me about something like that. But after talking with this woman in person, I really feel like it happened to her. But here she is. I mean, 41 years later and never came out. But hers is a different story. She did not know who he was at the time that it happened. She was from Tennessee, and she didn't know who the governor of Arkansas was. Mm-hmm. And so she never knew until about 2 or 3 weeks later when she saw him on TV.
So let me ask you this. You know, unfortunately too well, a man who was a very powerful man even back in the late 70s who allegedly, sexually assaulted you. When you hear the president today, Donald Trump, talk about grabbing women by the P word, when you know that there are women out there that have accused, and I say accused because we don't know 100%, but have accused Donald Trump of rape and sexual assault, what goes through your mind then, and do you think there are some similarities when it comes to Bill Clinton and Donald Trump with the way they treat women?
No, I don't. I think that most of anything that's come up with Donald Trump I mean, where are these women now? Why aren't they coming back out? If they were sexually assaulted against their will by Donald Trump, where are they? Where are they? Why aren't they being vetted like I was?
Well, I know all I can speak to that matter is that I know in 2016 they were vetted and they were doing a lot of interviews. And obviously you wrote a book and you've been very forthcoming with what took place with you. I think back in 2016, many of those women did come forward. The problem is there's really nothing, just like there's nothing you can do about it now. It's not like, you can take Bill Clinton to court and see if he can go to jail like what happened with Bill Cosby. I think with a lot of these women, they're in the same circumstance. Again, I don't want to speak for them. But
Sure.
I mean, I have to ask you that question because, as I would totally be on your side. Bill Clinton was a womanizer, and obviously you claiming that he raped you, and like I said, I have no reason to doubt you. Let me be very clear on that. I'm not going to doubt these women either because I do believe Donald Trump has a history of mistreating women. Just based on the things that he says about women alone would raise eyebrows to me. But I understand, your concern. Let me ask you this. Going back in the late 70s, obviously you would not be in a room alone with Bill Clinton again if you had to do it all over again. But would you have contacted the authorities back then? I understand he was the attorney general. I understand that it was a long hill to climb, tough hill to climb to even hold him accountable. But would you have called the authorities and would you have, gone to see a doctor and done all that stuff if you had to do it all over again, which obviously we would never want you to have to go through that all over again. But if you did, would you have...
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I understand that. If it was today, of course I would, but not in the 70s. In the 70s, people would say, all men will be men, just deal with it.
Right.
I mean, that's what we lived with every day, in far as verbal sexual abuse and touching and all that. I mean, we went through that all of the time. If it was present day, yes. There was no DNA results back then.
Sure. Listen, I got to ask you about Hillary Clinton because this is something I have a very big problem with Hillary, and I had a big problem with it then, and I still have a problem with it now. Hillary Clinton was very outspoken. She's always been outspoken. She's attacked women like you. She's attacked verbally women that have accused her husband of sexual assault, rape, and so on and so forth. That bothered me. I would imagine that really bothered you. What would you say to Hillary Clinton?
Well, whenever she says all of these cases have been adjudicated and litigated, that's a lie. Now, maybe Paula Jones has. I don't really, remember the results exactly of that except for her settlement. But my case has not been adjudicated or litigated.
Right.
Nothing. Leslie Millway's case has not been adjudicated. None of that. That's just the terms that she likes to use to get rid of that question.
Were you one of the women that Donald Trump asked to be at the debate when it was Hillary versus Donald Trump? Were you one of those women that were there?
Oh, yes. Yes, I was.
So how does that happen? Explain that to me. Does Donald Trump reach out to you? Do one of his campaign managers reach out to you? How does that happen?
No, Steve Bannon's people reached out to me. I was in Washington, D.C. doing a big interview with Breitbart and on a plane going home. And one of Steve Bannon's people called me and asked if I could go to the debate the next night in St. Louis. And I told him I didn't know. I just have to think about it. I'd let him know when I had a layover in Dallas. And I got to thinking about it, and I thought, I called my son. He's an attorney. And he said, oh, Mom, did you hear that tape? And I said, yes, and I believe that's locker room talk. I honestly believe, because I know how even women talk, in the private of other women. But I decided, my God, look how the media had treated me. This is a most public forum for me to come back and say, right. Hillary threatened women that were abused by her husband. And that was important to me to come out and say that.
And I don't have a problem with that, and you have the right to speak your voice. But I have to ask you this question. If it's Joe Biden versus Donald Trump, and Joe Biden decides to invite all the women that have accused Donald Trump of sexual assault, would you have a problem with that?
No.
Well, I'm glad to hear you say that. Listen, you have a right to tell your story. I would never take that away from you. Just as I'm sure you would agree, those women who claim that they were sexually assaulted by Donald Trump have a right to hear their voice, have their voices heard as well. I'm sure you would agree with that.
Yes.
And there's nothing wrong with that. So when people ask you, Juanita, why you decided to write this book, you'd better put some ice on it, How I Survived Being Raped by Bill Clinton, what would be your answer? Why did you decide to write this book?
Well, when I wrote it, I was just doing sort of a memoir for my son to have. I put it on my computer and wrote on it for about 3 months, put it back and forgot about it. And then someone contacted me wanting to do sort of a serialized podcast. And I said, I have an outline. And then this young gentleman, his name is Nick Lully, he's the one that wrote the foreword for my book, said, no, we need to get this out there. So we just self-published it. It's not been a huge seller, and it makes me no difference whether, if somebody wants to buy it and wants the story, that's fine. But my main thing is education about the Clintons.
No question.
When I go and speak, I always tell people, you can sell my books or not sell my books. I'm just interested in talking about why I support Donald Trump and why I think that people need to know more about the Clintons.
So if somebody would say, well, wait a second, she's a Trump supporter, she's a Republican, she just doesn't like the Democrats, what would be your response to people like that?
For the response I would have for somebody like that is a very liberal Slate magazine through Slow Burn did the best interview and the best synopsis of what happened to me during the impeachment, what happened to me in 78. And this is the liberal media. And it's the most thorough. If they want to know the real story of what I went through, then go to this liberal media Slow Burn, episode number 8, and they'll have it.
Fair enough. Well, let me say this, Juanita, and I'll say it again. I have no reason to doubt you. I do believe you're telling the truth. If I didn't believe you, I would say it. While I do believe that there are, sadly, some women out there that do make up allegations of sexual assault, while that is a serious crime, I do not believe you're one of those women. I do believe this happened to you. I also believe that Bill Clinton has a past. He has a history, and I think it's important that you share your story. I think you are doing a service to the public and to women, and I think you're a very strong woman yourself for doing this, for putting yourself out there, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate you coming on our show, telling your story, and I'm so sorry you had to endure what you went through back in the late 70s. I hope it never happens to you or any woman in this country, quite frankly. So thank you so much for joining us. We really do appreciate it, Juanita.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thanks a lot, Juanita.
That is Juanita Broaddrick, accused Bill Clinton of rape back in 1978. Her book, You'd Better Put Some Ice on That, is a book I'm probably going to read. Very sad that this woman had to endure that. I believe her. I absolutely believe her. She goes into detail, the struggles that she's had to endure, and I do appreciate her honesty when she says, well, what about Donald Trump? What about those accusers? We'll take a quick break, and when we come back, I want to take some phone calls. Your thoughts on that interview, 702-257-5396. Again, that number to call if you want to be a part of the conversation is 702-257-5396. We'll take a quick break, be back right after this. You're listening to The Vegas Take.